The first sign should have been the blood on the snow. James Sullivan stood motionless in his doorway, staring at the dark red trail leading from the tree line to a small black shape curled against his porch steps. The Montana blizzard howled around him, but all he could hear was the heavy thud of his heartbeat, a familiar echo from years spent surviving frozen terrains during his military service. What he discovered that night would reshape his life more than any battlefield ever could. The fragile creature he assumed was an abandoned puppy would one day grow into something that made even wildlife biologists step back in shock. But on that brutal February night, James had no idea he was about to raise one of nature's most formidable predators. The tiny ball of black fur barely clung to life. No larger than a coffee mug, its eyes still sealed shut, its body trembling violently in the sub-zero wind. Instinct took over. He scooped the creature into his flannel shirt, pressing it against his chest to share his warmth. Inside the cabin, James worked quickly, heat, towels, gentle hands. As the frost melted from its coat, he noticed the fur was an extraordinary shade of black that seemed to swallow light. Its paws were unusually large, but exhaustion drowned out curiosity. "Come on, little guy," he whispered, voice rough from weeks of silence. "Stay with me." The creature whimpered, a fragile sound that stirred a part of James he thought war had shattered. He warmed milk and fed it one drop at a time. Hours passed as the storm raged outside. By 3 a.m., the tiny animal finally slept soundly beside the wood stove. For the first time in months, James' mind wasn't haunted by memories of war. It was anchored to the small life fighting to survive. When morning arrived, both James and the mysterious pup had made it through the night. The nearest vet was 2 hours away in Whitefish, but despite the buried roads, James made the dangerous drive. At the clinic, Dr. Jennifer Mills quickly examined the newborn. "About 2 weeks old," she said. "Shepherd mix, maybe some husky. Malnourished, but strong." Then she asked the question James hadn't prepared for. "Are you planning on keeping him?" Before he could think, the pup's tiny paw wrapped around his finger. Something warm broke open in his chest. "Yeah," he said softly. "I'm keeping him." She sent him home with formula and instructions. "Feed him every 4 hours. It's a lot of work." James thought of his empty cabin and the long silent nights. "I've got time," he replied. Back home, a routine formed. Feedings, notes on weight, careful observation. Under his watch, the puppy, now named Max, flourished. His eyes opened within a week, striking amber, filled with an uncanny intelligence. Max learned fast. Too fast. He responded to complex instructions James didn't remember teaching him. He followed him everywhere. And at night, when nightmares dragged James awake, Max would nuzzle his hand, grounding him back to the present. 3 weeks after the rescue, James's neighbor, a retired sheriff named David, visited. One glance at Max made him whistle. "That's one big pup." 8 weeks. 4, James said. David stared. 4? What on earth are you feeding him? The comment planted the first seed of worry. Max's growth was extraordinary. His appetite was endless. His coordination and strength far surpassed any normal puppy, and his intelligence unsettlingly advanced. Still, their bond deepened. Morning hikes became lessons in tracking and exploring. Max navigated the wilderness with uncanny confidence, fearless and intuitive. Then, at 7 weeks old, the first truly disturbing thing happened. James heard a commotion outside one cold March morning. When he rushed out, he found Max standing proudly over a rabbit, its body limp, the kill clean and efficient. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching. Max wasn't even 2 months old. James stared, chills running deeper than the cold air. "How did you manage that?" he muttered. He tried calling the veterinary clinic. The receptionist, unaware of the truth, casually said, "Maybe he's part wolf. Some puppies are natural hunters." She had no idea how close she was. The comment should have raised alarms, but James was too absorbed in caring for Max to dwell on it. For all his strange traits, Max was fiercely devoted. He followed James everywhere, slept curled against him, and sensed his moods with uncanny precision. When anxiety tightened James's chest, Max leaned into him. When nightmares tore him awake, Max was already watching, protective and alert. By late March, Max weighed nearly 40 pounds. His paws were huge, his legs powerful, his head broad, clear signs that this was no ordinary puppy. Neighbors who stopped by began exchanging uneasy glances. During a visit, David watched Max move across the cabin with a silent, predatory grace and muttered, "That's not a normal dog. I've seen plenty of dogs in my life, and that, whatever that is something different." James tried to shrug it off. Vet said maybe he's part husky. But deep down, he knew David was right. The first howl confirmed it. Under an early April full moon, Max lifted his head and released a sound so ancient and raw that it froze James where he stood. It wasn't a dog's howl. It was a call from something wilder. The eerie cry echoed through the valley, as if announcing Max's belonging to a world far older than the cabin he slept in. More signs followed. Max's eyes glowed green at night. He preferred raw meat to kibble. He moved through the forest without a sound. Other dogs responded with fear or instant submission. And sometimes, he would sit at the tree line, staring into the woods as if hearing voices James could not. Yet Max grounded him in ways no medication or therapy ever had. He gave James routine, comfort, purpose, a reason to face each day. By May, Max's transformation grew impossible to ignore. At 3 months old, he neared 70 pounds, lean muscle wrapped in a glossy black coat that shimmered blue in the sun. His amber eyes studied James with unsettling intelligence, as though he were the one being observed. Then everything changed. One evening, while James split wood behind the cabin, a low growl rolled from Max's chest, so deep it vibrated in James's bones. Max stood rigid, facing the forest, lip curled to reveal teeth far too long and sharp for any dog. A mountain lion emerged from the trees, a massive male, drawn by the scent of fresh deer meat. It locked onto James with the cold focus of a predator choosing its target. James's rifle was inside, the axe in his hands useless. Max stepped forward. The sound he released wasn't a bark, it was a roar, primal and furious. Though far smaller than the cat, Max radiated a dominance that made the mountain lion hesitate. Two predators sizing each other up. After a tense standoff, the cat retreated into the woods. Max didn't relax until it was gone. Then he trotted back to James, tail wagging, expecting praise. James knelt, fingers trembling in Max's thick fur. "What are you, boy?" he whispered. That night, James searched every trait Max had: growth, behavior, instincts. Every path led toward the same impossible conclusion. He slammed the laptop shut, refusing to accept it. But Max curled beside him, warm and loyal, unbothered by the truth waiting to be uncovered. As spring deepened, Max's wild side grew harder to ignore. He disappeared for hours, returning with evidence of hunts. His night howls were often answered by distant voices from deep in the mountains. Ranchers reported strange sightings of an enormous black animal slipping through the trees at dusk. James kept Max close, but he knew he couldn't confine what was clearly meant to roam. Then came the morning that changed everything. James woke to find Max watching him with calm, knowing eyes. Their routine unfolded as always: raw meat for Max, coffee for James, a walk along their familiar trail. But something felt different, a tension weaving through the quiet. He was right. That day's vet appointment would shatter whatever illusion James had built around the animal he'd raised since infancy. The puppy he rescued was ready to reveal the truth of what he really was. But for that quiet morning, walking side by side through the Montana wilderness, James let himself savor the fragile peace. Whatever Max was becoming, he had saved James as surely as James had saved him. And the storm that brought them together was nothing compared to the storm coming when the world learned what lived in James Sullivan's cabin. The veterinary clinic in Whitefish had seen its share of strange cases, but nothing prepared Dr. Jennifer Mills for what walked through her door that late May morning. Max had to duck to enter the exam room. At only 16 weeks old, he weighed nearly 90 pounds and moved with a quiet, predatory power that made the floor tremble. His massive frame, rippling muscle, and burning amber eyes made Jennifer take an involuntary step back. "This can't be the same puppy you brought in," she whispered, shaken. "James, he's the size of a Great Dane, but built like—" She hesitated. "Like what, Doc?" James asked, though he already knew. Jennifer approached cautiously. Max sat immediately, obedient. Her hands moved over his massive frame, dense muscles, thick coat, Heavy bone structure unlike any domestic breed. When she checked his teeth, she froze. The canines were nearly 2 inches long. "James," she said quietly, "this is not a dog. I don't know how, but this is no domestic animal." James swallowed. He was dying. "I couldn't leave him." "I'm not judging you," Jennifer replied. "But we need to know what he is. Will you allow a DNA test?" She rushed the results. She needed answers as much as he did. While they waited, Max's wild instincts sharpened. He patrolled the property every night. His howls received responses, multiple, distant, and unmistakably wolf. He hunted with terrifying efficiency. James found the remains of a deer taken down with perfect precision. Yet Max's devotion only deepened. He became a guardian, silent, alert, always watching the cabin's perimeter. When James struggled with panic or nightmares, Max pressed beside him, grounding him with a presence more comforting than any therapy. David Henderson saw it too. After Max gave him a single warning growl on a trail, David backed away, pale. "That isn't a pet, James," he said. "That's a loaded weapon." James had no response. He knew. Then the test results came. The morning was strange, ravens filling the trees, Max tense in the truck. At the clinic, Jennifer handed James an envelope, pale and speechless. Inside, one line shattered everything. Canis lupus occidentalis, Northwestern wolf, 100% match. Not a hybrid, a pure wolf. Jennifer paced the room. "James, this is extraordinary. And dangerous. You're legally required to report him. Fish and Wildlife will relocate him. Either a sanctuary or the wild." The drive home was silent except for Max's soft whimpers. If he reported Max, he'd lose him. If he didn't, he was breaking the law. That evening, Max howled at the moon, an aching, lonely sound. Voices answered from deep in the mountains, closer than ever. "You belong out there," James whispered, hand resting on Max's thick fur. "Not here with me." Max pressed against him, as if answering, "I choose you." The days that followed were filled with research. Wolves were intelligent, emotional, deeply loyal. But Max was something more. His ability to read human emotion, his decision-making, his bond with James, it exceeded anything documented in wild wolves. He hadn't just bonded with James. He had imprinted on him. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching. Chosen him over instinct, over nature, over every wild call echoing through the mountains. And that choice would soon demand a sacrifice neither of them were ready for. The breaking point came a week after the DNA results. One morning, James found Max standing rigid at the window, eyes locked on the tree line. 5 wolves waited there in a half circle, their bodies still, their focus unnerving. They were powerful and wild, but none matched Max's black coat or towering size. The alpha, an older gray male, stepped forward and released a long, deliberate howl. It wasn't random. It was a call, or a challenge. James instinctively reached for his rifle, but before he could touch it, Max turned and shook his head. Slowly, deliberately. A gesture so human it froze James mid-motion. Then Max walked to the door. Against every instinct, James opened it. Max stepped outside with calm authority. The wolves watched him, their stances shifting from curiosity to recognition. The alpha dipped his head, acknowledgement, not submission. For 10 agonizing minutes, Max stood among them, and James felt sure this was the moment he would lose him. But then Max turned his back on the pack and returned to the porch, sitting beside James without hesitation. The wolves slipped silently into the forest. James dropped to his knees. "You picked me," he whispered. Max leaned into him, choosing him again. Word spread fast through the valley about James's enormous dog. Ranchers whispered. Locals speculated. Some dismissed it as gossip, but others, especially those who'd lost livestock, began asking louder questions. Max sensed the tension and became more careful, protective without provoking. James changed too. His nightmares eased. His constant vigilance softened. The wolf grounded him in ways nothing else ever had. Jennifer visited often, still hiding the DNA results from authorities, risking her career to give them time. "This won't hold forever," she warned. "I know," James always said. But knowing didn't make accepting any easier. The collapse came on a humid July evening. Lost hikers wandered onto the property. Max protected James instantly, calm, controlled, but undeniably a wolf. The hikers fled, but one recorded the encounter. The video went viral within days. Montana man keeps wild wolf. Asterisk illegal? Dangerous? Asterisk. The attention James had feared was finally here. David arrived at dawn. Fish and wildlife will be here within a week. You need a plan. What would you do? James asked. David watched Max for a long moment. You fight for him, or you disappear, but you don't hand him over if he doesn't want to go. James stayed on the porch with Max pressed against his side. Engines rumbled in the distance, closer, faster than expected. A convoy turned up the road. Fish and wildlife trucks, a sheriff's cruiser, a large transport van. A full capture operation. Max stood perfectly still beside him, every muscle coiled, reading the threat. Jennifer climbed out with the officials, guilt written across her face. She had protected them as long as she could. The lead officer, Richard Robert, approached cautiously, one hand near his tranquilizer gun. Max's growl vibrated through the porch boards. Mr. Sullivan, Robert said, we've received reports and videos showing you're keeping a wild wolf. We need to assess and take action. He isn't wild, James said. I raised him from 2 weeks old. This is his home. Robert's expression softened briefly. Maybe so, but wolves are protected. Keeping one is illegal. He needs relocation, to a sanctuary or back into the wild. His name is Max, James said quietly, and he isn't going anywhere he doesn't choose to go. Silence. Max stood like a living shield in front of James, massive, alert, aware, no longer a pup, no longer a pet. The reckoning had arrived. Jennifer finally stepped forward. Richard, let me try. She approached slowly, hands raised. James, we need a solution. Max is extraordinary, but if he hurts someone, even accidentally, the consequences won't fall just on you. They'll fall on every wolf in this state. He'd never hurt anyone, James whispered, though he knew Max would defend him with lethal force if pushed. There may be another way, a new voice said. David Henderson stepped out from behind the trucks, and beside him was someone James never expected, retired federal judge Margaret Emma, a woman whose name still held power in Montana. Only later would James learn she was David's sister-in-law. Judge Emma, Robert said, startled. This is outside your jurisdiction. Margaret smiled calmly. Wildlife law has always been one of my specialties, and I believe there is legal precedent for exceptional circumstances, especially when a bonded animal provides documented therapeutic benefit. She opened a thick folder of medical records and legal documents. Mr. Sullivan is a decorated veteran, she said. His medical reports show dramatic improvement since forming a bond with this animal. James glanced at David, stunned. David shrugged. Told you I'd help. They moved the discussion inside. Max stayed glued to James's side, his quiet presence filling the small cabin. Judge Emma laid out a legal argument with surgical precision. Rare cases existed where special permits were granted for animals outside normal regulations, if the mental health benefits outweighed public risk, and if strict safety protocols were in place. Robert shook his head. Those involved partially domesticated species, not a pure wolf. The debate stretched for hours. Max stayed calm, alert, a silent testament to his control. Jennifer described James's transformation since Max entered his life. David spoke about Max's restraint and loyalty. Even neighbors, drawn by the commotion, testified that Max had never shown aggression toward them or their animals. Then a scream shattered everything. They rushed outside. A wildlife officer stumbled backward from the trees, terror etched across his face. From the forest emerged a massive grizzly, foam dripping from its jaws, rabid, unpredictable, deadly. The officers reached for their weapons, but the bear was already too close. Max was closer. He launched forward in a blur of black, planting himself between the humans and the bear. His snarl was ancient and feral, vibrating through the ground. The grizzly reared, towering over him, but Max didn't move. He held the line. This was his territory. These were his humans. He would not let anything touch them. The standoff lasted seconds that felt like minutes. Max didn't attack. He didn't need to. His presence alone sent a message the bear understood: proceed and die. The grizzly hesitated, huffed, then turned and disappeared into the trees. Only when the forest went still did Max return to James's side, composed and silent. Shock rippled through the group. They hadn't just seen a wolf act tame. They'd seen him protect everyone, even those who'd come to take him away. Robert's voice shook. That bear would have killed someone. A young officer whispered. He saved our lives. Judge Emma stepped forward, seizing the moment. Gentlemen, this is exactly why this bond must be protected. This is not a threat. This is a partnership. The tension shifted. Fear began to dissolve. Robert exhaled slowly. There would have to be conditions. Hope flickered in James's chest. Regular inspections. Secure containment. Liability coverage. No public exposure. No breeding. Done, James said without hesitation. And if there is any aggressive incident, Robert added, the permit is revoked. I understand. Jennifer stepped up. I'll provide ongoing medical supervision and behavioral documentation. For the next 2 hours, they drafted something unheard of. A legal agreement allowing a wild wolf to remain with a veteran as a therapeutic support animal under strict monitoring. But in the end, only one thing mattered. Max would stay. As the convoy prepared to leave, Robert approached James privately. You realize this is extraordinary, he said quietly. We're bending more rules than I'm comfortable admitting. I know, James replied. Thank you. Robert glanced at Max, who watched intently. That wolf would die for you. And I'd do the same for him, James said. Then take care of each other. And keep him away from anyone who won't understand. When the last vehicle disappeared, James collapsed onto the porch steps. Max leaned against him, warm and solid. Against all odds, Max could stay. The abandoned pup who had turned out to be a wolf could remain with the soldier he had saved. Word spread. Scientists, filmmakers, activists, they all wanted a piece of the story. James refused them. This wasn't a cause or a spectacle. It was two wounded beings who had found healing together. The months that followed were far from easy. Max's wild instincts persisted. He hunted under James's guidance, howled to the wild packs without crossing the fence, and remained fiercely protective when strangers approached. James reshaped his life around Max. No town trips, no casual visitors, 8-foot fencing to meet legal requirements, and a symbolic boundary marking their world. Sometimes the wild pack came close. James watched from the window as Max communicated with them, a silent conversation of instincts. Yet Max always returned, always chose the cabin, always stayed beside James. Jennifer visited monthly, documenting growth, behavior, and responses. She marveled at Max's ability to detect James's emotions before James even recognized them. He knows you better than you know yourself, she observed. He probably does, James admitted, letting Max rest his head in his lap. Their first winter as a legally bound pair was brutal, but James found comfort in the isolation. Max thrived in the cold. They formed new routines, morning patrols, quiet afternoons by the fire, and evenings where Max howled to the mountains, and the mountains answered. One night, during a storm, James awoke from a nightmare, not of war, but of losing Max. Max was already awake, staring at him with amber eyes. I know you could leave, James whispered. Max huffed and rested his head beside James's hand, a quiet reassurance. This was what he was born to be, not just a wolf, but a guardian, a companion, a friend. When spring marked a full year since their first meeting, James reflected on their journey. From a half-dead pup to a wolf capable of driving off a grizzly, from a broken soldier to a man with purpose, everything had changed. On the anniversary day, David Henderson arrived, bringing a local reporter who had been trying to tell their story. James braced to refuse, but David raised a hand. She's not here for sensationalism, he said. She wanted to write about veteran recovery, unconventional therapy, and the healing power of animals. Max was only a part of the story. The reporter, Sophia Chun, treated the situation with respect. She didn't want to make Max a spectacle. She wanted to help veterans still struggling in silence. Do you know how many soldiers come home broken and never make it back? She asked. Your story could give someone hope. James looked at Max. What do you think, boy? Ready to be famous? Max yawned, flopped onto the porch, and ignored the question. To James, it meant something else. Their bond was steady enough to withstand attention. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching. All right, James said. But the focus stays on healing. Max isn't the star, he's a therapy partner. When the article came out, it honored that promise. Max was mentioned but never sensationalized. The story was about recovery, resilience, and the power of animal companionship. The response was immediate. Veterans shared stories of dogs, horses, even a rescued hawk, all creatures that saved their humans from darkness. James wrote back, sharing lessons on patience, routine, and letting an animal break through walls no person could. Max often lay beside him, nudging his elbow, reminding him to live in the present. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, James and Max watched a distant wolf pack move through the valley. Max observed calmly, uninterested in joining. His choice had been made long ago. "Thank you," James whispered, "for staying, for choosing me." Max turned his amber eyes to him, carrying everything unspoken: gratitude, loyalty, and a bond deeper than words. As night fell, Max lifted his head and began his nightly howl. James joined him, off-key, awkward, undeniably human, but Max wagged his tail in approval. Their voices mingled with the distant howls of the wild pack, carried across the valley. Max didn't look toward the wild. He looked at James, his chosen family, his purpose. The abandoned pup, never truly a puppy, had grown into exactly what he was meant to be. Not wild, not tame, something in between, entirely his own. The future was uncertain. Max would age, navigating a world he was never meant to live in. James would continue healing, rediscovering pieces of himself he thought war had erased. But they would face it together, veteran and wolf, bound by a storm, by loyalty, by love that defied nature's rules. Inside the cabin, Max curled beside James's bed, steadfast in guarding the man who had saved him from the snow. The storm that brought them together had been brief. The bond it forged would last a lifetime. In saving each other, they had discovered something rare, a connection proving that love has no boundaries, not of blood, species, or the world's rules. They were living proof that profound healing often comes from the most unexpected places, and that family is defined not by biology, but by choice, commitment, and refusing to give up on each other.